everyone, and welcome to episode number 8 of the Prostate Cancer Patient Empowerment Program PC-PEP Podcast. I'm Dr. Gabriela Ilie. I'm an endowed scientist in prostate cancer quality of life research and associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University in Canada. In this powerful and uplifting episode of the PC-PEP Podcast, I sit down with Nick Aiken, a board member of the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand, PCFNZ, and a passionate advocate for men's health from Napier, Aotearoa, New Zealand. We first met Nick and his wife at the 2024 PCFNZ conference in Christchurch, thanks to the visionary leadership of the CEO, Peter Dickens, and the growing collaboration between PCFNZ and PC-PEP. That meeting sparked an enduring connection, and this conversation is a testament to what's possible when men around the world stand up for each other's healing. When Nick Aiken, a respected urban planner, was diagnosed with prostate cancer in his early 50s, life as he knew it was interrupted. He had just left a secure leadership role to start his own business when the diagnosis came, at a moment of both professional reinvention and personal vulnerability. In this powerful and inspiring episode, Nick shares how the PC-PEP program helped him regain his footing, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. As a board member of the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand and an international leader in PC-PEP's global expansion, Nick is helping reshape the way prostate cancer is understood, discussed, and supported, especially for men in rural and underserved communities. From advocating for PSA testing reform in New Zealand to breaking taboos around intimacy, masculinity, and mental health, Nick's story is one of reclaiming agency and finding purpose in the face of adversity. Welcome, everyone. Nick, thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast with me. You've been with us with the program for a long time, and your wisdom inspires me. I've learned so much from you. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's been a really valuable time being part of the program. I've learned a lot, found it incredibly valuable to me and to my wife. Getting through what was perhaps the most difficult period of my life, really. So it's been great. Very, very grateful to the program and to you and Rob as well.
Thank you. So you're from New Zealand. You live in New Zealand. Whereabouts do you live?
I live in a smallish city called Napier. There's actually two cities here that are next to each other. They call them the Twin Cities. There's about 150, 180,000 people. It's on the east coast of the North Island. So this is the sort of the warmest, driest part of the country. It's where a lot of the wine comes from and the fruit and bits and pieces like that. The city itself was destroyed in 1931 by a major earthquake. I think there was only one building left in the central city. So the entire city was destroyed and they rebuilt the whole thing in Art Deco, or mostly in Art Deco. So it's considered the Art Deco capital of the world. So it's actually quite a nice place. We get a lot of tourists here, a lot of cruise ships. Just maybe a little bit not what you expect, but no, it's lovely. We really like it here.
That's beautiful. Let's start by if you don't mind me asking you, how did it all happen for you? Where were you? What was happening in your life at the time that you got the diagnosis? How did you find out? And what was that like for you and your wife?
Well, it was, I'm sure it's quite challenging for everyone. It was challenging for us because I had just left my previous job. So until the middle of 2021, I had quite a high profile job in my profession. So I'm an urban planner, urban designer. So I was the country lead the technical lead for the country for the company I worked for, which is funnily enough, a Canadian company called WSP. So I had a really good job.
Those are everywhere. Those canals are everywhere, yes, Nick.
I know, can't escape. But it was great, but I sort of reached the point in my life where I was spending more time managing things than doing what I love doing. So I decided to take a break and go and work for myself. So unfortunately for me, when I got diagnosed. It was 8 months after leaving the secure job I'd had for 16 years and just been really, 6 or 7 months, 8 months out working for myself. So it was quite poor timing in terms of financial security. And the last thing you want when you're just starting up your own business is to get really ill. And I guess I'd noticed a couple of changes and sort of through that 6 months, but I didn't really think too much of them. And it was really at Christmas at the end of 2021 when I went away to stay with my wife's family for Christmas that I noticed I was having to get up in the night to go for a pee, and I was having a lot of trouble going. So, and that was it. And the only reason I recognised that was because a few years before I'd been across to Australia on a holiday, and over there they had this thing called a pee ball, which is like this little ball, and the idea is you put it into a urinal or urinal and you pee on it. And if your stream's good, it's supposed to dissolve the ball, and if it's bad, it isn't. So it was put out by the Australian Prostate Cancer Society, I think it is, as a bit of a game, but to get guys to think about some symptoms. So very grateful to that little thing that I picked up in a chemist shop that I was dragged into by my 2 teenage daughters. A very fortuitous thing that they pulled me in. But yes, I'd just gone out on my own, really bad timing, very, very stressful for my wife and I. And a real shock too. We certainly hadn't expected that.
Yeah, you were also a young man at the time. You still are a young man, but you were younger than 50 years young. Did I get that right?
I was 50. Well, I would have been still 51, just coming up towards 52.
Oh,
yeah.
That's young. That's young. That's young. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people said that to me. Oh, you're too young for this, and yeah.
And it's funny because I was we're doing podcasts and talking to various men lately. I've been interviewing a lot of young men because for the longest time we thought that, prostate cancer, it's an old man's disease, but that's just not the case, Nick. More and more younger men get prostate cancer. And there's this whole idea of, how do we find out, what is it I should look for? Is there anything I'm eating? Am I sitting too much? Am I too stressed? I mean, what are some of those modifiable factors that perhaps, and if I see any of them, there could be a red flag. Let me go and, get a PSA check so I could know. It is no longer, I guess what I'm trying to say is no longer an old man's disease. Prostate cancer happens to a lot of young men. Pay attention, gents. If you're listening to this podcast, there are some signs that you should pay attention to. Nick mentioned a few of them. And to just go to a doctor to ask for a PSA is not much, How are things in New Zealand? Can you just go up to your doctor and say, hey, doc, why don't you click that box there with a PSA? Is it as simple as that?
No, unfortunately, no. And that was, I guess, part of why it was such a shock to me. No, here there are some guidelines. They date back to 2015, I think it is. They were supposed to be renewed in 2018. Sadly, the health ministry here haven't renewed them. So the guidelines are quite old. They talk about familial risk. But really what they say is that the doctors aren't really supposed to identify getting a PSA checked here. So really the practice here is that it's left to the man to ask the doctor for a check and then to talk to the doctor about it. And I think that goes back to the sort of a narrative around overdiagnosis. But I did go in and see my doctor when I was 45, and I said, hey, look, should I get a PSA test? Which I must have seen somewhere on a flyer on the wall or something. And his response was, no, don't worry about that. You'll be fine. No one gets that really. Only old men get it. You'll die with it, not of it. And it's not a big deal. And I wouldn't do it if I were you. Even though I mentioned the familial risk. And the guidelines here say, it's over 40 with that familial risk. So I was 45. I went back when I was 50, had the same conversation with him, and he said, oh, no, I wouldn't bother. It's not worth doing that. So I was actually discouraged from getting a PSA check. Sadly for me, that didn't turn out quite so well. So, but it's a very mixed bag here. So some of my friends say their doctors say, oh, you should get this done now. Other ones discourage them. It's very, very mixed. There's no uniformity in the approach, which is, I think, a bit of a worry, really.
Yeah, it is. And the same here in Canada. I mean, most medical doctors, family doctors don't really push it unless they hear there has been a, family history. And even then, it depends who you're getting. There's a lot of inconsistency here as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've learned since then, actually, because I'm reasonably proactive, I've become a lot more proactive since my diagnosis. But I didn't realise, but my family's a BRCA2 family, so I have a pathogenic BRCA2 gene. But because when I went and spoke to my GP and I talked about my grandfather, he wasn't really interested in him, and he said that my mother wasn't relevant. So the New Zealand guidelines only talk about male relatives. I don't have any brothers. So they completely ignore female relatives. So I have actually had a conversation with our health ministry agency here, so Health New Zealand, and their specialists around this. And, it's an undisputable fact that, you can inherit BRCA2 from your mother as well. But our guidelines, sadly, don't talk about that at all. So our GPs are probably completely unaware of the need to think about inheriting it through the female line. So there's a really big gap, I think.
Yeah, there is a gap. There is a gap in education at the level of the family doctors. There is a gap, of course, in education at the level of the society. Because if our doctors don't promote it, then maybe I shouldn't quite pay attention to it, right? Because if it was that important, my doctor will bring attention to it. So it's really interesting. And we've been doing this kind of research for a good number of years now, 8-9 years. And it's really personal and really incites advocacy when you hear a young man say, I feel like I went from 57 to 75 overnight. 20 years, a lot of life and living, and gives you a lot of time to adjust, to land on things, to accept, to move on. So sometimes the advocate in me, the little Romanian revolutionary in me that wanted to overthrow Ceausescu is saying, I should go to the GP and ask them, how are you doing, doc? How would you like to feel 20 years older on a flip of a finger? How would that be for you? Because then the message is much more personal. And so maybe that will propel some change. So I know that there are many things that need to change with respect to that, with respect to detection, with respect to looking into things and being more proactive. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand, and how in the world did you come across this program called the Prostate Cancer Patient Empowerment Program in New Zealand?
So I think because my diagnosis journey had a few challenges to it, and I found it very difficult to get hold of information about treatment choices and side effects and so on. I was lucky enough to stumble across the local lead. So we have support group leaders across the country here for our Prostate Cancer Foundation. And I stumbled across him and gave him a ring and had a bit of a chat with him about some things. So he gave me some information that was very valuable. Unfortunately, it was inconsistent with what I'd been told. But what it meant that it started me down a path of really asking a lot of questions to try and find out as much as I could about where things were likely to go for me and maybe what treatment I should think about, side effects and so on and so on. And the Prostate Cancer Foundation was one of the agencies, really probably the best or only agency that's really available here to go to and ask those questions and get information. But I found that, I guess, two things. One was I saw a need for some really big change in what happens here in New Zealand for prostate cancer men and their families. And I became very determined that I was going to become part of trying to drive and achieve some of that change. And I get, in a way, that's really a bit of a part of who I am. And that's why I had that job with WSP because a lot of that was around cultural change within the organisation and leading change and all that sort of stuff. So to me, it became more a bit of a natural thing to say, look, actually, this isn't okay. What's happening here? We need to do better. We can do better. Here's an organisation that I can get involved with. And so I leapt into that, stood for the board, got onto the board, and then really tried to make as many suggestions about things as I could in terms of what we can do better and information, so on. PC-PEP, I came across in the Prostate Cancer Foundation here, so a little bit before my engagement, but there must have been a link made between the foundation and PC-PEP, and there was a pilot program being run. I said, this looks really good, because I'd by now found that there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't know, and that I realised people were probably not going to tell me. And I thought, PC-PEP, what a great way to start to find out this information. So I missed the pilot program, unfortunately, but I got on to the next batch and never looked back. And it's been really, really valuable.
Yeah, well, we benefited a lot from your participation in the monthly video conferences. It's a real community has been formed, I think, between the patients participating in the program, those that completed, that are coming back. We're doing monthly video conference where we update the science behind the program. We keep gens informed. And I really like the way things turned with respect to the two countries, because originally in the beginning, when we had the pilot, we were thinking with Peter Dickens and the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand that we will have a monthly video conference just for the Kiwis, and we'll keep it separate from the Canucks. And it all started where, at the beginning there were just a few gens on the pilot, and they kept saying, yeah, and what do the Canucks do? And what are you doing in the other? We said, we're doing the same thing. We said, well, it would be nice to see those guys. And then we told the Canucks, on Friday nights, which is Saturday morning in New Zealand, we're doing this thing with the Kiwis. I said, what are you telling the Kiwis? And we said, the same thing we're telling you. It's just another session. It would be nice to see the Kiwis. So we thought of asking the two groups, would you like to have a session where, we bring the two of you together? And that was that. Ever since, they wanted to just have one session with the Canucks and the Kiwis. I think at the end of the day, we're so much more alike than different.
Oh, absolutely. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, no, look, it's so good being able to have the people from all over the different parts of the world, the Canucks, the English, the Australians, I think are on there, the people from the USA. So I think it's good. I haven't come across them yet, but I think, yeah, absolutely, because one of the things I've really found is that once men have had this diagnosis and they end up, going out to support groups or out for a coffee or talking on PC-PEP through Zoom, is this sort of camaraderie, or almost like a brotherhood type thing. We hear a lot about the sisterhood. It's a bit like the brotherhood, where there's this ability to connect and understand and relate to what's happening for the other people. The challenges that you go through, the medications you go on. They might have a different name, but you understand what they are. And it's really nice to be able to talk to people who understand some of those challenges, and also to hear what they've done to help overcome the challenges. And you learn so much. So it helps you feel better about yourself, or for me, it made me feel better about myself, understanding it wasn't just me. Other men felt the same way, had similar challenges, and that they were finding ways to do things about those. And so you would take that on board and go away and try it. And some worked and some didn't. So I think really, really invaluable. And the bigger the pool, as long as you can cope with the size, is the better, I think.
I agree. I think it's nothing short of wonderful what we achieved in terms of staying very grounded, all of us. It really feels like we're just a bunch of good friends. I mean, here we are, even before doing this podcast, we can't wait for you to visit Canada. It feels so, it feels like we've developed very strong relationships. And I think because we're so honest with each other, so vulnerable, we talk about urinary incontinence, we talk about symptoms that are, could be very private to people. We talk about sexuality, we talk about intimacy, we talk about how,
we feel when things are not going our way, when there's a little bit of despair, a little bit of anxiety and frustration, and that are very normal. And how do we overcome them so that we can feel better every day, so that we can be the best version of ourselves, for ourselves and for the people in our lives? And I'm, as a scientist, I'm actually so deeply grateful, but also very surprised. I never thought that you could accomplish something like this in a group of so many men from so many places all over the world, where, I feel that we respect each other a lot. In those, we never had, any, weird situation when somebody says something that is, inappropriate, or everybody's very nice, very decent, very kind, very understanding, very reassuring.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely are. And I think it's an invaluable thing. I think it's really hard to understand how valuable it is until you've been a part of that. As I was just thinking, as you were saying that, the difference between that and, say, a work or a group of friends, you could go out with a group of friends and say you've been getting headaches, or go into work and say you've got a sore knee, but you wouldn't go into work and talk about having erectile dysfunction. But at home, or you might be really suffering from that. That might be a real stress factor for a lot of men, and I know it is, because we all talk about it. And this is a place where you can go and talk about the stuff, and it's fine. And whether it's on the PC-PEP Zooms, or even in our support group, cups of coffee down at the local cafe, that's what the guys talk about, because all of a sudden the taboo is no longer taboo. And I think if you're really struggling with some of those side effects that you just can't really talk about with other people, or you don't want to talk about it with your wife, maybe, although that would be sad if you couldn't. But I just think it's really, really, it's so valuable. It really is. And it makes a huge difference in being able to get through it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the program, how it started, at what point did some of this information started to hit home, and you thought, maybe I should give this a try? Or so what are some of the things that work for you? What are some of the things that perhaps didn't work for you? And what made you stay, Nick? What made you commit so much of your time, your energy, and your love? Because you're very kind to people. You support you in the breakout rooms. You always have a good word of compassion. You share from the heart. You're an invaluable member of the program. You're also a lead for young men internationally for the program. So tell us a little bit about how did the program roll for you? And
I think initially there was probably two things that really stuck out for me. So one was the access to information that I was finding it hard to find. So I found it when I went to an oncologist that they'll just tell you about some medication. You go and see a urologist and they'll just tell you about a bit of mechanics, as I call it. You go and see a radiotherapist, they might talk about a little bit of radiotherapy. Very difficult to join the dots between the specialists. And often, erectile dysfunction, as an example, I'd ask all three of them, what do I do about that? They're like, oh, that's not my job. I don't do that. All three. And so I was kind of left with this, well, who do I ask then? Where do I go? And so there seemed to be really, really big gaps. And so for me with PC-PEP, one of the key first things was, here's a program, here's something where it's a much more holistic approach, where they're giving you some of that information you might get from those specialists, but there's a whole lot of other stuff. Those specialists, none of them talk to me about diet. None of them talk to me about, believe it or not, about Kegels. None of them really talk to me about any of those sorts of things. So it really enabled me to see, get some reinforcement around some of the things that they had told me, but also to fill in the gaps between those disciplines, and to start to look at the whole thing in a more holistic way. The other thing I think that I really liked about PC-PEP that kept me engaged in the program, so the daily videos I thought were great. They're just wonderful. Yourself and Rob are just amazing in those. The videos really, in a way, sell the program because it's so engaging, and there's a real sense that, as you said before, of compassion and care. And I did find, some of the specialists I saw just didn't really seem to care at all. It was very transactional. You get 15 minutes or 30 minutes, they'll give you a couple of facts and you're out the door and you don't see them for 3 months. And it's kind of like, you walk out and you're like, what do I do now? My life's been turned upside down. Whereas with you and Rob and the program, it was every day. There was a touch point. There was something upbeat and reassuring and engaging. And it just, to me, it made me feel a lot more supported and a bit more valued. It seems odd that, through a computer screen gives you a sense of being more valued than actually going and sitting in a room with a doctor. But that's kind of what it did. So it was good. And so it really just kept me engaged. There were a couple of things in the program I struggled with. I struggled with the monitor. I found that hard to use, and I used to get stressed trying to do it. So it actually had a counter effect, and I actually gave up on that in the end. And just took time out and relaxed instead. But most of it I did. Kegels I was already doing before. I'd found out about that by myself. Already doing that, but it was good to see the exercises on there because it helped me when I'd forgotten something and to go back and do a bit more physical exercises. I'm a bit younger, so the bands didn't work so well for me, but I joined the gym. I go to the gym 5 days a week. I weigh less now than I did when I got diagnosed.
Oh, so good.
On ADT. So that's all good. So all of that diet, massive
good,
diet changes.
so good.
Yeah, it's great.
What would you say to people that just get diagnosed in New Zealand? They get a prostate cancer diagnosis. What would you say to them?
I would say that it's really, for me, the key lesson was not to sort of sit back and let that diagnosis determine the rest of your life, really. And to get out there and say, well, okay, so there's something wrong with me, and yes, it's cancer, and it's the C word, and everyone's terrified. I was terrified when someone said that word to me, but I learned that there's, what's really important is to think about what can you do, or for me, what can I do to make things better for me, to reduce the chance of it coming back, to keep myself as healthy as I could, to get on with life as much as I could, and to stay healthy and motivated and as positive. And it was challenging at times. ADT is a pretty nasty thing. It's not fun. But I think it's really important to not see that as the end, but to go, I need to think about what I'm going to do here. I need to ask lots of questions. I need to be informed. I need to be my own agent. I'm not just going to sit there and say, look, the doctor will tell me everything. The doctors will tell you a lot, but you really need to take control. I found, for me, take control of my own life and determine my own outcome as much as I could. And that made a huge difference to me, because I went from feeling quite powerless and having, something happen to me, to feeling a lot more empowered and thinking, well, at least I can do the best I can, and I can have, the best life going forward that I can.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you said that. It is about empowerment. It's about agency. It's about identify the things that you can control. Yeah,
I think so. And then I think the other thing too, when you go into that, those first few meetings with the doctor, and you have your PSA and it's up, and you have your MRI or your PSMA and your biopsy, a lot of your focus, a lot of the doctor's focus is really on survival. What treatment do I need? How can I not die? And that's obviously really important.
Yeah.
But I think often what gets overshadowed is, what sort of a life am I going to have going forward? And that's really important, because your treatment's only going to be, a month or two. The rest of your life might be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so part of the thinking about your diagnosis and what you do and your outlook really needs to be about your life after treatment, I think. And I'm not sure that that's always the focus of the specialist. So as a man and as the partner of a man going through prostate cancer, I think that's a really key thing to not lose sight of, and really try and focus on keep a bit of your mind free for that too, as well as just, your first instinct is, how can I survive? But I think you kind of need to add in that, what's my life going to be like afterwards? How can I make it as good as it can be?
Yeah, I agree. And go check out our website, PC-PEP.org, the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand. My goodness, you have such a progressive foundation for prostate cancer that is really trying to do the best, advocate for men, bring programs that will empower, that will bring that sense of agency back into you. Because like you said, Nick, you don't want to wait, worry, and waste your life in the meantime, because what happens, you worry in between appointments because you just have to wait. You wait for those appointments, right? In the meantime, you worry, and part with that is also wasting life. I'm going to have to wait. Well, until when? Well, until I know, until the treatment happens, until I make sure that the PSA doesn't go up. Well, that could be 3 years, that could be 5 years, that could be 10 years. What are you going to do in the meantime? And there are ways, and the program that we established really tries to bring the power back into those diagnosed, and make you feel that you're not alone, that there are some things that you can do that will help you decrease inflammation, that will help. You will work alongside with the medical system. You will bring, but through the things that you do, you bridge this gap that you identified, Nick, and you're talking. There's a gap between what's happening with the person, what you're going through, and what the medical system has to offer. The treatment is there, but they won't take care of the whole person. And that's what we're noticing, that people wait, worry, waste in the meantime, in the interim. And to change direction on that, it's quite a job, especially when you just got the big C diagnosis. You don't have to be alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used the analogy the other day on the Zoom call of a car, and I mean, I know nothing about cars. I barely even fill the oil up if I need to. But to me, it is. I now look at my body really as a bit like a machine, just like I look at a car. And if you want your car to keep running, you've got to service it. And you need to look at all the parts that need servicing, not just one or two. So you really need to look at the whole thing holistically and make sure you are keeping your body as serviced and as maintained as you can going forward. And if there are gaps in there, if you take your car into a garage and it's a computer fault, well, they're not going to fix it. Well, that doesn't mean you just give up. You go and find someone else to do that. So it's the same I find with my body. If a urologist can't fix it, I'll go like diet, for example. They don't seem to be interested in diet. And so I learned from PC-PEP, it's really important. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I made a real effort, and it was an effort actually. I went and found a cancer dietitian and then talked to her about prostate cancer. And she's like, no one's asked me about prostate cancer before. She said, we do all sorts of other cancers, but not prostate. So we've had a few meetings now, and she's like, it's great when you come in because I learned so much from you, she says to me. But it's really good because I can still get the bits and pieces I need around, supporting bone density and muscle mass and stuff.
Yes.
We learned too. And I'm thinking, well, I'm doing something good here because now when the next prostate cancer guy goes in, she's now focusing on that too. So absolutely. Look, it's the holistic thing I think is really important.
What's next for Nick? What are you up to?
Next in what? In the prostate world or the personal world?
Both, a little bit of both.
Okay, so the prostate world. So I've just been re-elected back onto the board of the Prostate Cancer Foundation just the last week. So that's good. I was lucky that we didn't have more candidates than spots, so it wasn't contested. But no, I'm very pleased to be back on there. There's actually there's a couple of younger guys on there, some my age, and we've got a real, and a nurse, you would have met Jenny, a specialist nurse. So we've got a real focus on, what can we do to make things better in terms of quality of life. So I've got a lot of work that I want to continue to do there. I think, even there's a lot of talk about the diagnosis, 20 questions to ask your urologist, that sort of stuff. But I think, after that diagnosis, the rest of your life is such a key thing. So I've got a couple of projects in mind that I want to put in place. I started some of them in my last term and I want to carry those on. And I'm quite engaged. So I'm running a mini conference here with a support group leader for prostate cancer men where I live. So we've got about 100 or so people coming to that. We've got a series of specialists coming along to talk to them. We're trying to get as many GPs along as we could because we're trying to increase their awareness of what's going on and the impacts on men so that they can help the men, because you end up back with your GP and they don't really seem to understand stuff from what I can see. So we're really trying to be as proactive as we can. And I'm really keen to do as much of that as I can. Personally, so it's today here in New Zealand, it's Thursday morning. On Saturday, I'm driving to Auckland, and on the next day, jumping on a plane. So my wife and I are off to Europe. We were thinking about going to Canada, but
next year I'm hoping.
Yeah, it didn't work in terms of a stopover for us this time. So we're off to Germany, Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland. For us, it's a trip that's been deferred for the last few years. Because of the whole cancer situation, really. So it's marking the end of my time on ADT and AAT. So the way I'm seeing it is a bit of a milestone and a bit of a transitional phase. So, before this trip was the 3 years of cancer treatment, and after this trip is the rest of my life. So, and also I'm using this as a bit of a transition point or a threshold to cross over and then go into, the rest of my life and put that behind me.
So happy to hear that. And I'm happy that you are capitalized on different forms of intimacy, and that includes travel, that includes recreational, that includes creative. There are so many things that fill our soul and give us this sensation of having our emotional needs met, that we live a life with purpose, that we recognize ourselves in others, that we love more fully, that we give.
Yeah, actually, that is one of the things I really like about the PC-PEP program, actually, is it talks a lot about, intimacy and the different types of intimacy. And it was interesting because as I was looking at those questions and doing the weekly questionnaires, I was thinking, I already do a lot of this, but I was thinking, well, maybe some people don't. And I thought, but it's also incredibly valuable, whether it's cooking together. I don't particularly like cooking, and neither does my wife, but we do it together, and it's a lot more fun.
So good.
Picking up the cat and giving the cat a cuddle. My cat turned up just before I got diagnosed. So I think it was sent to me for that purpose. But I think it's all really, really important, I think, the intimacy, because the most important person really when you've had a diagnosis is your partner. So if you've got one, so being able to do that, I think it's really key. And if you don't, I think to be intimate with yourself, and intimacy in terms of just yourself. So having compassion for yourself and giving yourself a bit of a break when you need it. I think it's really, really important, and I do really like that part of PC-PEP. Because I think sometimes, I'm not sure about how it is in Canada, but, us males, sometimes we try to be a bit too stoic, and, we're quite unforgiving on ourselves, and, just toughen up and chin up, get out there and do the job, But sometimes we actually do need to give ourselves a bit of a break, really.
Yeah, the same here in Canada. I think it's part of the socialization, how we socialize men versus women, and, be the tough, you're the tough man, you're the, rather than really getting deeply in touch both with our emotions and our emotional intellect that allows us to stay more connected and love. Because at the end of the day, really, and it doesn't matter which literature of the planet you read, but it all says that we all want the same thing. We want to feel connected, and we want to be able to love and be loved. And it is, I love in Dunedin, their university there, Nick. When we were there 3 years ago, I remember there was a plaque on the university that said, "Where the love of man is, so is healing." I took a picture of that, and for the longest time I had that as my profile on Facebook, because I thought, what a beautiful and truthful thing to say. You can't have healing where the love of man is not. So where the love of man is, so is healing.
I'll have to go and have it. It's actually where I originally am from, Dunedin, and I haven't seen that. Next time I'm down there, it's a wee way away from here, but I'll have to go and have a look.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a good saying.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today. Really, I appreciate you making the PC-PEP program more aware in New Zealand. And I'm hoping that men listening to this program will be more inclined to reach out to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand. The program is free for all men in New Zealand. It doesn't matter where you are, in the north, in the south, in the east of the country, Maori men, non-Maori men. You're all welcome, and we welcome you to the program. There are many Kiwis in the program. There are many Kanats, and we all share the same value, and that is, how can we see your interests as our own, recognize ourselves in you, and heal together with a word of compassion, humility, laughter. We laugh a lot, and understanding and desire to really do good. Not only for the perception of good, but do good, really do good. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, and for the opportunity to talk to you about this. And it just, I guess that reminds me of the need that's out there for me and others like me here to really push the program in New Zealand as well, because I don't think enough people are aware of it. And when we do go and have a cup of coffee with them, we talk about it, they're like, oh, that sounds great. I want to join that. But and I think there are probably hundreds. In fact, I'd say there are definitely hundreds of men here who would love to be on PC-PEP, maybe probably thousands, to be honest, who just aren't aware. That is one of the challenges we have, I think, in prostate cancer, is the awareness isn't that great. You know, we don't have. I look at women, and I really envy women in many ways. You know, around I guess it's like the sisterhood, the sort of collegiality that you've got when you look at things like breast cancer. You know, I mentioned my mother had breast cancer, but all my sisters as well. So they've all got the gene, cousins, aunts. So it's all over the place. And, you know, for them, it's quite different because it's very acceptable to talk about breast cancer. Everyone's aware of it. It's a common thing, you know, but in prostate cancer, even though it's more common and more people die of it here than breast cancer, the awareness is very, very low. And so, you know, there's so many men out there who just don't know about things like PC-PEP. And I think one of the real challenges for those of us who know is to try and get the awareness out there. We owe it really to those guys to make them aware of these excellent tools like PC-PEP, so they have the chance to improve things for themselves.
Yeah, please try to do whatever you can at your end. And at our end, I think next time you come to New Zealand, and I'm not sure if it's going to be November or December or early at the beginning of next year, but we are planning to come back. And I think we'll do what we did during COVID. Actually, we traveled with two Canucks, Ross McDonald and his wife Pat. We came to New Zealand, and we gave talks to the prostate cancer, to I think 4 or 5 or 6 prostate cancer support groups all throughout New Zealand. Peter Dickens was kind enough to organize. That was wonderful. So we ought to do that again. And we had such an uptake of men, again, awareness, right? Because I think it's really up to those prostate cancer support groups and men like you working for the foundation to get the word out. We have a similar issue here in Canada. So that is an area that we can all perhaps think more creatively at ways of getting the word out. But I like the idea of, we're also working with the Cancer Society of New Zealand. We also have a program for all forms of cancer, Cancer PEP, not PC-PEP, but Cancer PEP. And they are running right now a pilot for 50 people diagnosed with all forms of cancer, free for anybody. And they are getting the word out for men, because some men come with prostate cancer and they say, you have a free program with the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand. So we got I think about 5 or 6 men referred that way, because they went to the Cancer Society of New Zealand and they said, PCFNZ has a program, go to them. So it's lovely, but there is more work to do in terms of advocacy. And I think another thing that we're launching here is starting next month is Men of the Month, the PC-PEP Men of the Month. Isn't that good? So again, we're raising awareness. So for the Canucks, for the Kiwis, I think we're going to take turns, and we advertise it for young men, because a lot of young men get prostate cancer diagnosis. For Indigenous men, the Maoris, our Indigenous people as well here in Canada. Black men, it's very prevalent among Black men, Nick, even more so. Huge issue there as well. And rural men that live in remote areas. And you think, imagine living in the boonies, not really having prostate cancer support groups around you. I mean, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think it's good. I think it's one of the challenges. I think it's a bit like that the breast cancer example is the normalization of prostate cancer. That I think with less awareness of it, how common it is, it's less normal. So that makes men, I think, less keen to talk about it. The side effects are embarrassing, so incontinence or erectile dysfunction. I mean, erectile dysfunction is a taboo subject. You can't talk about that if you're a man because, that's a terrible thing, really. So I think there can be quite a sense of a shame. And I think the more that it can be normalized, the more that people can see, lots of people have it and it's a bit like breast cancer. It's terrible, but it's out there and we need to face up to it. I think that's great. So I think anything that helps normalize men having prostate cancer is wonderful because it removes some of that. I think shame's probably the best word. So that, and in some parts of society, it's tougher. For Maori men, it is tougher. I don't know for Black men because we don't have too many Black men here, but for Maori men, definitely. There is a name for it which I can't think of, but yes, definitely. But for the general population, I mean, no man wants to, especially younger men too. Like I work, I still sit in an office and work, and I don't want to sit in there and have people look at me and go, this guy might have incontinence or whatever. So it is very challenging. So I like that idea, and I think the more we can get that out there, the better, really.
You made me think, a beautiful point. Thank you, Nick. You made me think of something that Rob said. Rob said, how sometimes he gets asked, how does healing look like? Give me an example of healing. And Rob says, well, sometimes healing looks as simple as you having the power and the peace within your heart to say, I have cancer. Even that, I have erectile dysfunction. Even that is such a place, from there you can go up, because now that that's out of the way, you get to realize, so I get to be present in intimate moments that make my heart open. Because really, sexuality is a gateway to that, feeling connecting with another person. And there are so many other ways in which I can still feel connected. Okay, I may have erectile dysfunction, but I can still feel very connected and find ways where I can be authentic, I can be real, I can land on that place of perhaps a loss and mourning that loss of erectile dysfunction, not having erectile function. But I can go from there, I can move from there. I can be more aware. I can take in, it's like, savoring a raisin in your mouth, so much flavor in one raisin if you just be mindful. So all of a sudden you get to experience so much more pleasure out of life, even when you don't have erectile function. But it is that process of healing, of landing on what is without guilt, without shame, like you said. There's a lot of shame around this, with awareness, with compassion, with love.
Yeah, I think it is, as a younger man, it is one of the most difficult things to confront. It really is. And it's certainly something you can't really talk to a lot of people about. So I think in my mind, for me, it was, I can't allow that to happen. And that would be the end of the world and so on. So it's a hard thing. And for me, I had to accept things weren't the same as they were before. For me, they're not too bad, but they're not the same as they were before. And then, it was then, what can I do to keep them as good as they can be? So it was back to that car analogy again, and I learned diet's really important, exercise is really important. intimacy with the other person is really important. So, but you do need to accept it, I think, and I think it can. If you don't do that, you can end up in quite a dark place. And I think a lot of men really struggle with that. And the ability to talk to others, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, a support group, it's on PC-PEP, people like yourself and Rob. I think it's such a key thing, because that's one of the biggest gaps that I found in the whole prostate cancer medical world is around sexual function. Very few of the specialists seem to want to own that or say it was part of their area. I mean, there's a few people around. If you look online, you can find them. Australia seems to be quite good with some of that stuff. But it can be quite a lonely place. It's hard to talk about. Men are terrible at talking about that stuff in the first place. From what I hear, women are a lot better about it. Men are terrible. It's not something guys talk about normally until you get prostate cancer. But so important, I think, mentally to sort of front up to that challenge, and then find, just accept what it is. Do the best you can in terms of keeping it as good as it can be. But there is definitely a life. I was going to say a life beyond erection. I can still get an erection, so I can't say what it's like to not get one and say there's a life beyond it. But there's a life beyond the changes and what you can have, definitely. And it's important to know that.
Adaptation is key.
Absolutely.
For the longest time, I taught psychology at the University of Toronto, and the people that age most graciously, most happily, most fulfilled are those that adapt. Okay, so my knees are not as good as they used to be. I can't jump every, 2 steps at a time. I'm just going to go 1 step at a time. And I'm just going to take a pause on the 5th. No problem, I'm just going to look around. Oh, look at those roses. I had no idea that people had flowers on their balconies before. Interesting. Adaptation is key.
Absolutely. I think it's really important.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick. It's been wonderful. Have a wonderful trip to Europe.
I will. I think it's going to be amazing. We haven't been for such a long time on a trip overseas.
Enjoy every bit of it. Yeah.
I will.
I hope you come and see Canada next year. I hope we're on your wish list.
You are definitely on my wish list, and my wife has been talking to me about, we need to go to Canada, and I want to go to Canada for years. So it's definitely on the. In fact, the alternative trip we had was because we like to get a car and drive, so we were going to start in Florida and drive up to Halifax, up the east coast of the States.
That would be so lovely.
Yeah, so that's definitely on the bucket list. But it sounds like you might be over here before we get to Canada.
Yes, definitely. I think we'll see you in the meantime. So we get to see each other every kind of 6 months or so. We see each other for a little bit.
I'm going to have to remind Peter to put me into the loop of when you're over so that Kate and I can come and catch up.
Definitely we will do that. Thank you, Nick. Have a beautiful holiday. Thank you for sharing from the heart. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you and Rob do, Gabriela. It's just such an incredible resource what you've put together. And speaking for myself as a man with prostate cancer, I'm just so incredibly grateful to the work that the two of you have done, and the rest of the PC-PEP team, and the university too, for making it all possible. Because there's a huge gap, and I think PC-PEP helps fill quite a big chunk of that.
Until next time.
Yeah.
And this concludes episode number 8 of our podcast. For more information about PC-PEP, please visit pcpep.org or pcpep.org/NZ. For the PCFNZ website, please visit prostate.org.nz. For all other forms of cancer, please visit cancerpep.com. For a free version of the CancerPEP program in New Zealand, go to www.southerncancer.org.nz/cancer-PEP. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, be well and take care of yourselves.